Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Harish Manadia from Shipping and Freight Resource. Today, I have two very interesting guests with me, Mr. Konstantin Komodromos and Kerim Kifuri. Konstantin is from Vesselbot. He's the CEO of Vesselbot, a emissions monitoring system. And Karim is the CEO of Atlas Network. Gentlemen, could you give us a quick introduction about yourself and your company?
Sure. Who would you like to go first, Harish? We're happy to go either one.
Sure, you can start, Karim.
Sure. Okay, my name is Kerim Kifuri, president of the Atlas Network. We are a global supply chain solutions company that has been in business for almost 20 years, with the focus of helping our customers avoid expensive mistakes, specifically in the global markets. We've built up a process through the past 20 years of effective supplier selection, on-the-ground resources for quality control, and third-party attestation to ensure that our customers have the most efficient, high-quality, impactful experience in kind of the global sourcing and manufacturing supply chain market. And happy to be on the show. Thank you for having me today, Harish. Really appreciate it.
Welcome, Karim. Konstantin?
Thank you, Harish. My name is Konstantin Komodromos. I am representing here Vesselbot. Vesselbot is a technological company that measures Scope 3 emissions for all transportation modes using primarily original data or primary data, as they are called, direct from the sources, as well as lots of proprietary models that we've built in order to enable us to accurately measure emissions for our customers and enable them to take action based on those data. So thank you very much for hosting us, Harish.
Good. So we wanted to discuss a bit about what has happened in COP28 that ended in Dubai recently. So Karim, maybe I'd like to start with you. What was the core message of COP28 as far as you're concerned, and how do you see it impacting global shipping?
I mean, what a wonderful time for us all to be a part of what's happening in the Conference of Parties 28 conference. The main key points that I saw and noticed as it relates to global shipping and specifically our industry is the efficiency of trade routes and examining the emissions from shipping and logistics that must be reduced. And specifically that if shipping was a country, that it would be the 8th largest harmful emissions producer in the world. So we've come to a place where we really understood and sort of categorized, the impact to greenhouse that shipping and logistics has. And a lot of the new solutions and innovations that were being discussed was primarily around a net zero emissions by 2050. Which was a target and goal that many of the attending and collaborative countries and organizations have decided to work diligently towards in their own ways, including some of the largest oil refineries such as Aramco. Some of the largest shipping lines in the world were obviously in attendance. And many of these discussions also ranged around the green corridor initiatives, around some of the longest, highest emission producing routes, such as Shanghai to Los Angeles, which is one that we do all the time in our business, importing from Asia to the United States. And then, even some longer term ideas around, some aspects of the Inflation Reduction Act, which is the largest bill on climate change, which is going to have almost a $7 billion investment by the United States Department of Energy in the development of hydrogen hubs for shipping and trade. So, these were a lot of the, key points overarching that I was really paying attention to, not just for the next, 5 years, but obviously the next 25 years, taking us into, 2050 and beyond. So it's pretty exciting, and I think that there's a lot to be learned and look after. But I obviously look to your thoughts and also to Konstantin's thoughts, who's experts around emissions and so forth. And but yeah, those are some of my takeaways from COP28.
Great insights. And Konstantin, you mentioned about Vesselbot doing Scope 3 emissions. What exactly does it entail? What is Scope 3 for people who might not be aware of what it is? Just a brief on that, if you may.
Yeah. Basically, Scope 3 is considered the emissions that arise out of any transportation of a company that is done with any transportation mode that it doesn't belong to them. So I'll give you an example. You're Nike, you're IKEA, and you're shipping with MSC, Maersk, whomever, CMA. Those vessels do not belong to you, but those vessels do emit emissions to carry your cargo. So the emissions related to your cargo are called Scope 3 emissions.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And from my side, what I've seen from COP28 is obviously the shipping community coming together, the shipping fraternity, and the top guns in container shipping. At least there was MSC, which is number 1. There was Maersk, which is number 2. CMA CGM number 3, and Hapag-Lloyd number 5. These are some of the top container shipping lines in the world who are able to influence decisions. And together, I was quite happy to see that they have together committed to achieving these goals that have been set by themselves as individual organizations, and also by the IMO for the reduction in emissions, and also more importantly the amount of money that they have committed to it. MSC had I think over 15 billion in terms of their commitments. So everybody, instead of just talk, I saw a grouping of leaders powerful enough to make such influential decisions, and coming together and making a commitment in public at such a big event, which is very, very heartening to see, because we do need the control in emissions. And although I have a slightly different view on what you mentioned, Karim, of course, from in terms of number 8 in the 8th country in the world. Shipping is still the lowest emitting industry, just above rail in terms of transportation. Air is, of course, first, followed by road, and then sea, and then rail. But that's a point of discussion that many people are having in terms of how close that is, because not all countries are providing their emission statistics. But yes, it is of great concern. So, Konstantin, back to you. Are there any legislative measures that have been adopted, or can we expect any of those following what happened at the discussions at COP28?
Let me make a small comment here, Harish, on what has been previously mentioned. I've got some numbers. Alternative fuel, which is one of the ways that is expected to lead to reductions of emissions coming from the ocean transportation, is, as per the new buildings, we expect by 2028 to have around 8% of the fleet with alternative fuel. So, and this is without adding the new buildings that are already being built with the heavy fuel. So I'm not sure whether this percentage, let's assume that is 8% of the total container fleet.
Yeah.
Is not sufficient to reduce by 20 or 30% that the IMO has set as a reduction strategy. I'm not confident that it is, to be honest. And I'm not judging the intentions of anyone. I know the difficulties of having to build these kind of big assets and costly assets, and the problems that exist due to the non-existence of alternative fuel in many ports and the availability of that infrastructure that is required. But what I'm saying is, based on today's facts, I'm not confident that we can reach that level of reduction that we are aiming, at least in the container segment of the ocean transportation. Now, many regulations are coming into play that will push most likely many ship owners and carriers to do changes. Either this is called voyage optimization and use technology or other mediums to enable them to reduce their consumption of fuel. One is slow steaming, especially in times when demand is less than supply. Slow steaming is a strategy that is being applied anyway, as it is happening today. A lot of carriers, or some carriers, have explored just-in-time arrivals, but I expect that legislations like the one that is going to start on 1st of January, being introduced by the European Union, the inclusion of maritime emissions into what is called the European Union emissions trading scheme, where carriers will need to pay for the emissions that are when they are calling a European port. So that apparently will be shifted to the carrier, to the shipper. The surcharge will be shifted to the shipper. However, I guess that shippers will start pushing their carriers to make changes so that they are not charged additionally on their freight cost. So I would expect to see more things happening in the next few years, and especially if IMO concludes to a global emissions scheme where emitters will have to pay. So there are quite a few things happening, Harish, that I believe that would be pushing the market to make some more big changes. Hopefully.
And while talking about charges, of course, this new development with the implementation of EU ETS from Jan 2024 is also expected to bring some additional costs for the customers, because we all know decarbonization and climate change control and all these are not cheap. All of them carry cost, and especially as you mentioned, the new fuels are the creation of new fuels, maintenance, and also making sure that they are filled in all these ships, and also the areas where they need to be filled. It's not cheap, so those costs will definitely get into the customer's pricing. But these decisions that have been made at COP28, Karim, how do you see them affecting the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, and will it affect any of the sourcing strategies for some of your customers maybe?
I definitely do think so. First and foremost, I just want to say, just coming back to what you were saying and what Konstantin was saying, is that legislation is one thing, but what's really interesting to see is the adoption, right? You basically have the largest players in the space, as you sort of said before, Harish, that are this kind of fraternity of shipping and logistics that are getting on the same page at least. And this is going to be very important, because what you're going to have is you're going to have a certain level of higher upfront costs as we develop some of these new innovations and technologies that reduce emissions and new fuel alternatives and so on. But ultimately, you're going to end up having a certain level of accelerated return and efficiencies and cost reductions through time, right? I almost liken it to, the development of the computers, right? In the beginning, all of these computers cost, thousands of dollars. Now you can buy a computer that has the capabilities that, are 1,000 times more than their predecessors for fractions of a penny. And I kind of feel like this is sort of the similar type of idea that, up front, there are going to be some initial costs. They're going to have to be baked in to the industry, baked into the pricing by different businesses and so forth, because everyone has kind of raised the bar regarding new standards that have to be made and met to actually even do business, right? It becomes a cost of doing business. But with the idea that there will be ultimately some levels of return, and that there would be some additional cost efficiencies, maybe some additional efficiencies on the water as well. I think it's also quite important that by moving to some of these alternatives, we also become a little bit less dependent on just traditional, fossil fuels and oil products and things of that nature, which tend to, fluctuate due to global events. This will also provide some level of less kind of price elasticity, which I think is important, because in shipping and logistics, we know that the cost can vary from day to day, week to week, and a lot of that has to do with kind of global resource management. So if we can kind of take some of that back by having a more sort of standardized alternative mechanisms of power and energy, then that will produce some level of more streamlined pricing as well, which I think is important. And, finally, as it relates to this, and again, just as far as general business justification for businesses having to pay a little bit more, is that, if we want to all still keep doing business, we need to figure this out, and we need to figure it out globally and as an industry. And that's what I see is the beginnings of what's happening with COP28 and some of these initiatives by IMO and Department of Energy, and everyone's sort of coming together trying to figure it out so that they can have as much of a 90% reduction in greenhouse gases through some of these steps and opportunities. These were some of the statistics that were kind of being thrown around. And to Konstantin's point of 8% of fleet basically generating, let's call it 30% of some of the efficiencies that they're looking to achieve. Those could be obviously numbers for the press. Those could be numbers that are just to get people interested. But the point is that the conversation is relevant, right? And actions are being taken, and different groups are starting to produce their frameworks on how they, within their independent nations or within their independent business platforms, are going to work towards initiatives for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, which all will impact, costings, for consumer price index and so on, both in the short, which are going to probably have some levels of higher impacts, and then medium and longer term, where there will be efficiencies, I believe. So this is kind of the way I'm seeing it.
Oh, yeah. Constantine, there was some discussions about technological advancements and innovations, and to your point also, what are some of those innovations that will help the industry get to where they need to be in terms of emissions and control?
Look, I think definitely the biggest struggle here is to change and shift from fossil fuel, heavy fuel, to any alternative fuel that would significantly reduce emissions because of its nature to emit less CO2, less NOx, less SOx, all these kind of different gases that are being emitted by heavy fuel. The question is how easy this can be done, and in how many years this can be done. There is already a lot of work being done with methanol, ammonia becoming as an alternative fuel for the maritime industry. LNG has been a gas that has been used from a few years back, is not that big in the market at the moment. I don't know whether that will be changing at all. So this is the most difficult part. I think that shipping companies have started to understand that technology can provide them with an action plan to start working today on operational efficiencies and achieving operational efficiencies via data, via technology, via real-time monitoring of things and optimization of their voyages. So I think technology is coming into play, and it will definitely help much quicker than waiting for the big changes to happen. And this is something we all need to do, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned. We need to start taking action today with the means that we have available today to take action. And I'm saying that in the sense that if you can achieve 5% reduction, it is a good 5% reduction if it can be done today.
It's a reduction we didn't have before.
Yeah, it is better than zero. So
yes.
If we can do something, let's do something, at least with the tools that we have available today. And I think there is some misconception in regards to, there is no tools or data available that we can use. There are, as long as we are willing to not just tick a box, but actually take action. And by taking action means that we are fully vested into driving the business, because that's what is required in the end.
Absolutely.
To make certain business changes so that you can achieve the reduction.
Yeah. In fact, that was going to be my next question to Karim, because as a freight forwarder, what action plan do you suggest to your clients? How can they get in becoming sustainable and taking care of becoming compliant with the requirements of COP28? How do you see that?
Well, I think that there's two sides to that. On our side, obviously, as a global supply chain solutions company, we operate in many different aspects of the supply chain, and one of the big ones is obviously supplier selection at the beginning part. And we've been doing, significant efforts to only work with suppliers and provide suppliers to our customers that are working on, electric, not coal. They're working with the most efficient standards within manufacturing capabilities that there is. So in that way, we're already making an impact by doing this. We also, at the same time, when it comes to the materials selections of different products, are always suggesting different kinds of recycled materials or different kinds of organic type of bioorganic materials that can break down more easily for the environment and so forth. Specifically to the conversation around sort of shipping and logistics and kind of the COP28, discussion points. At this stage, as Konstantin said, a lot of the technologies and capabilities are not fully developed to where they need to be. They're kind of coming online, or some things that have been working in the past are becoming more relevant. So where we can have the most impact is to definitely suggest and present to our customers the more direct routes, right? The routes where, the container doesn't leave and stop in 2 and 3 different ports, because we know that by doing this, we're creating additional levels of complexity and emissions and so on and so forth. So more direct routes that basically reduce the time on the water, reduce certain levels of the emissions that can be produced is a key point. And of course, any kind of time where there's availability of renewable energy solutions, also as Konstantin had mentioned, with a certain percentage of fleets coming online in the next couple of years, selecting those over others, right? To basically help in the idea that we're trying to move away towards, the fossil fuels and more towards the alternative energy solutions. That's going to start from the business side. The business is going to have to push that forward with their clientele and customers, see that there's an outcome which is as good or better, and at the same time also has an environmental impact. And if we can do that, then again, it helps with the adoption, it helps with the proliferation, and it helps with basically the COP28 initiatives. So
great points. Now, final question for this session, Konstantin, I just wanted to check, how critical is the accurate measurement of emissions, and is it possible? And what sort of tools are you, for example, employing in identifying and producing the data that you produce.
And it touches upon something I wanted to mention about Karim's last comment. Karim, you will be amazed to see that is not just the shortest, quickest, more direct route that can significantly impact emissions. Having accurate data, as Harish just mentioned, is quite important. Why? Because it can enable decisions, and that's what we do. I'll give you an example. For example, if you know that in a given trade lane that you operate, you are underperforming in comparison to the average of the market, then you can go and drill down and say, okay, which are the carriers I'm using and what is their emissions intensity? Can I use an alternative carrier, which I could be getting the same freight cost, for example, but significantly lowering my emissions? Yes. So these, Harish and Karim, is the importance of having accurate data. Up to now, majority of the market has been using average of average data. So long historical data were compiled and done with a statistical analysis. They were provided by different frameworks to enable measurement. But this is not sufficient today because the average numbers do not give you these kind of insights I just mentioned to enable actions based on those data. So what we do is we actually use geospatial data, digital twins, weather, ELD data, telematics data, IoT data. So we compile a lot of primary data with our models and we measure accurately, and we have industry benchmarks to enable our customers to make these kind of operational internal optimizations rather than basing all their intention to reduce emissions on third parties that they would have to take action themselves. So yes, Harish, is totally important if we want to act today to use the best quality data that we can get our hands on. And anyway, we use high accuracy data for all of our business. Then I guess we should be using high accuracy data for sustainability purposes as well. And I wouldn't expect an accountant saying, use the average cost of 3 years' time to estimate the cost of, I don't know, my electricity this year. You don't do that. You go and find the proper cost.
Yeah, so this would be a good point for our discussion maybe next year after COP29, where we can see an update on progress from all of us. But Karim and Konstantin, thank you for your time today. It's been a useful discussion, and the objective of this is to let the outside world know how things are progressing and how companies like Vesselbot and Atlas Network are helping in doing everything that is possible to bring down emissions within their own scope of work and area of work. But yes, thank you very much for your participation today.
Thank you so much, Harish. Always a good show and great to be with you. Nice to meet you, Konstantin, as well. And excellent work you're doing at Vesselbot. We're hoping that will help, obviously, a lot of small to medium-sized businesses grow, feel that they can do their part, and help to really decarbonize as much as we can the supply chain. So thank you for all the work you're doing at Vesselbot as well.
Thank you, Karim, and thank you for your good words, kind words. Harish, thank you for hosting us as well. And it's been a really great discussion that we. So really,
thanks,
like
James. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.